Testing, testing. Now you can hear me with two headsets. That's wild. Well, we gotta love these things, I swear. Well, round two. I'm gonna take off this other one and see if I can do that. My great, nice quality headset, and we'll go back to the old ghetto one that we've used for, like 4 years now, something like that. Welcome. My name's Timothy, though some people do call me Tim, and we're musing today on the topic of whether or not we can fix the Ranger. If there's anything that can be done that will salvage this class that is so bemoaned in the community. Hopefully, our studio audience here will have some thoughts that they can chime in on, and I've got a couple of thoughts of my own that we'll share. And my accent's a hot wreck at the moment because I just got back from Australia, which is ironically where I'm from. So if you didn't realize that, then welcome. You might be new, or perhaps I just haven't talked about enough. But I am originally from Tasmania, Australia, and I was back there for the first time in 8 years. And we even recreated the great incident of me falling into the Tassie Devil Pit when I was a small child, which is a very strong memory for me for obvious reasons. Anyway, let's dive in. And I want to just give a quick shout out to David, Stephen, Charlie, Ashen Gaming, and Zainab for all being here. Appreciate you guys for showing up and giving me somebody to talk to, because talking to yourself is really disconcerting and not as much fun as you might think it would be. Though it is a great way to get expert advice. I'm just throwing that out there. Just chat to yourself if you need expert advice. Right? Anyway, all that said, here's a couple of thoughts. I know, Ash. I know it's you, Ozzy. I just didn't. I was trying to. Everybody else is going to see you as Ashen, so I wanted to call you out by what they're going to see. Anyway, what's wrong with the Ranger is kind of my first question, and there's a couple of answers that have been floating around. First and foremost, I think everybody kind of agrees that the dependency on Hunter's Mark as a concentration-based spell is kind of annoying for the Ranger because it pigeonholes you into this one mechanic. It'd be kind of like requiring every Warlock to cast Hex just because it's a Hex. Hex is a Warlock only spell. If every Warlock had to cast Hex in order to be effective, then we would be less happy with the Warlock class, right? It would be more annoying that we had to deal with that particular thing, especially since they have so many other awesome concentration spells that they could be using. Concentration is a big problem for the Ranger, just as it would be for the Warlock if Hex was a must-have, right? Another issue is that other marvelous creators who have way better brains for doing the mathy thing on spreadsheets and everything have pointed out repeatedly that the damage for Rangers in the higher tiers of play does not match up to the other class options. So if you are playing a Ranger, you'll probably be fairly competitive for the first 5, maybe even 10 levels. But after you hit, say, the 11th level mark, you just are going to fall behind everybody else. And nobody wants to play something that doesn't have longevity, even though most games are going to end at like 7th to 10th level. That's the stats that they put out for us. They say that that's what people are doing, though personally I try to run my games till 20. A lot of these campaigns are not making it that long. And yet people are not going to choose the Ranger because they don't like not having an end game available to them. So that's another problem. A third problem that's maybe less of a problem, and especially because it again falls into that whole this doesn't matter until forever later, but their capstone is pouring as all get out and kind of sucks. So that's kind of lame and silly. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about how to fix it in a moment, but we have a suggestion here from Charlie right off the bat that Beastmaster, which is a great subclass that actually mechanically works out pretty well, like from a strength standpoint, especially if you're going for like a dual weapon up close sort of fightery type. It can be pretty decent, but it takes up your action economy to tell your beast what to do, which is sensible from a balance standpoint, but kind of sucks fun-wise. His point there, I want to fight alongside my beasts, not instead of them. And that's a really great point, and I think very sensible. I think that from a math standpoint, that's probably where they chose to do that. Is that they saw, especially at the lower tiers of play, they saw the kind of power that would come from giving a beast that could fight on its own to the Rangers' already pretty impressive single target DPS at in melee and even at ranged at low levels. And they said, "Oh man, this is too much. It's going to push it too far outside the outliers." But they didn't necessarily take into account that as you go up, it that feeling that difference is no longer such a case, right? You're no longer going to be best in class damage if you had the beast beside you. You might just be able to keep up with people at the higher end. And so I don't necessarily disagree that it would be a good idea to find a way to disconnect them from your action economy or at least lessen it, like David's saying there. If we got to tell them just once what to do and then let them go at it, then that'd be one way to handle the action economy for creatures that can survive a little bit longer. They would get you get a boost in your action economy, but kind of like putting Hunter's Mark onto a creature. If you had to spend a bonus action to sick your pet on him and then fight alongside him, that might be one way to handle that disconnect and connect things for the future. So that could be a good homebrew option. Somebody else would have to do the numbers, I'm sure, but still pretty cool. Good idea, Charlie, but I think that it was probably to avoid overpowering people in the low levels that they made that change, or that they didn't go that route. That would be my thinking on why they did it. It is possible to bring the ranger in line with the rules as written with other classes, and indeed to give them a high damage potential. Unfortunately, the way to do so seems to be to multi-class out of ranger. Treant Monk did a really cool video that I'll try and link when I repost this thing as an actual video. But Treant Monk found a druid ranger multi-class where you're relying fairly heavily on the somewhat broken conjure minor elementals, or is it conjure woodland spirits? I always forget which one it is that's broke as I'll get out, but you know the one I'm talking about. 2d8 extra damage on every hit, and every time you upcast it, it gets even stronger. Nonsensely powerful spell. Multi-classing a ranger into that is really, really good. Conjure minor elementals. Thank you. Really, really good and super strong. And so a ranger druid combo can turn out some really impressive mid-tier damage while still taking advantage of the ranger's really good low-tier damage. And so if you are looking to stick to just rules as written, then that might be a route to go in order to get the most out of the ranger. And I just want to mention that because I always try to find ways to fix things with the rules as they have been written before I start thinking about ways that we could homebrew and step out. My design philosophy, if there is one to what I do when I make changes at my table, is that less is more. I want to change as little as possible to the rules so that somebody coming into my table doesn't have to learn a 5-page document of house rules in order to play or know how things are going to turn out. They should be able to understand the rules because the rules are the same everywhere. And so the less I change, the better it is for people who are coming into my tables. I play for a lot of different people. I've got something like 25 to 30 active players at the moment. And I've had in the last 4 years probably closer to 60 different players. So I have to do that. Not everybody's table is the same. You might be playing with the same guys you've been playing with since high school, and that's pretty great. So don't take that philosophy as being the only way to do things, but it's kind of the way I approach things. So with that in mind, I had 3 sort of thoughts about how we could fix the ranger with a less is more approach. The first one is, as a homebrew option, dropping concentration from Hunter's Mark at level 13 instead of making it impossible to break the ranger's concentration at level 13. The reason that I think that this could make a big and significant change is that by level 13, admittedly 2 levels late from when this kind of thing should kick in, because these kinds of changes usually at level 11, there's a good bump in power. But if we left it to level 13 and we removed concentration from Hunter's Mark at that point, then all of the other features that are built into Hunter's Mark, like getting automatic advantage all the time at level 17, doing additional damage as your capstone, the free castings that you've been piling up on top of your other stuff so that you can do that and a spell in a round, all of those things would still be intact. We'd have to change very little. And then you could be concentrating on a more important or impressive spell alongside the Hunter's Mark that you're still utilizing. This would be a way to encourage a higher ranger level in a multi-class like the Conjure Minor Elementals build, because you'd then be able to have Hunter's Mark and a lower level Conjure Minor Elementals and still be pretty effective. Or you'd be able to, at high levels, take Swift Quiver and combine Swift Quiver and Hunter's Mark in order to put out a higher damage instead of getting an extra attack, but costing you a d6 of damage off of each of your attacks. Similarly, with the dual weapon fighting style, which seems to be pretty well built for ranges, you would be able to get all that additional damage from your Hunter's Mark. But you would also be able to enchant the weapons or drop ensnaring strikes in the middle of combat, or throw out an aura of damaging effect with the other ranger spells. You'd have options that could include your Hunter's Mark instead of being stuck with only Hunter's Mark as your only option. And I think that that would go a long way to improving things. I don't know if from the math that would fix ranges in the higher tiers. Somebody who is better at those kinds of spreadsheety things would have to figure that one out rather than me, I'm afraid. But I feel like it would go a long way towards helping it with a very minor change that fits the current progression of levels and everything. Very minor change. That's my original thought. I've got two other thoughts, but before I go into that, I'm going to go ahead and back into the comments and see what's been said here. How you rebalance it to make it more fun but still balanced. Okay, are we talking, Charlie? When you asked that, are you talking about Beastmaster again, or are we talking about Ranger in general? And then in the meantime, should be a pool of charges, kind of like key points or fighter. You can call them animal bonds or something, that you have a finite amount to get extra out of your beastie. That would be a cool homebrew for sure. I think it might take a little bit to figure that one out there. David asked, could you lower the damage output at lower levels? You could, but I don't think that you should. I think that Ranger is on track at the lower levels and doing pretty awesome, to be frank. They're not outrageous damage. They literally can be matched by a fighter in most of their situations, excepting, of course, the Hunter's Mark that's boosting them a little bit higher. But they're very good. So I don't think that they're in an unreasonable position at low levels. I think they just fall behind at the mid tiers, mostly because at 11th level fighters get an extra attack. At that kind of level, barbarians are getting their brutal strike for extra damage. You've got your paladins are getting an extra d8 of radiant damage on all of their attacks, etc., etc., etc. Everybody else gets something that adds to all of their attacks, and the ranger already got that up front. And so even in subclasses, we get abilities that give them like an extra d8 per round instead of an extra d8 per attack, trying to limit them from double dipping from so many sources. But we shouldn't be stopping them from double dipping, because if they could double dip, they would keep on a more it'd be a more accurate representation alongside the other classes. That would be another easy way to fix it, would be to make any subclass ability that adds damage once per round. If you added that to once per attack instead of once per turn, that would seriously impact the ranger. The problem is that some of those come in at 3rd level when they don't need the help, instead of at 11th level when they get another subclass ability. Charlie, you're very, very right that 13th level is really late, and so that is a hard one. Hey, Ozzy, thank you so much. The Get Good GIF reminds me of last stream, and that's so awesome. And thank you so much for the super. That's really, really kind of you, mate. I appreciate you. You're a good bloke. Um, let's see. Talking about Big Battle Master for Charlie's question earlier about making it more fun but still balanced. Um, I think that the easiest way to do it would be to give the animals more options. If you're going to homebrew something in there, keep the damage portion the way it is, but give the animal something else cool that it could do without it costing you your action economy. And that way, the damage that they've progressed in there stays where it should be. But in addition to being able to give it a bonus action to tell it to do damage, you could give it a no action to tell it to do something else, like the flying creature could harry it in order to give disadvantage on the creature's attacks, or the land creature could grapple your opponent in order to stop it from being able to move, or so on and so forth. If you gave them abilities that were tied to their creature type that didn't demand your actions, then you can make them more fun and more effective without increasing your damage potential off the curve too much. Ooh, great question, Archer's friend. How do you balance it with magic items instead of built-in abilities? That's a great question and a great way to address problems as a DM. Archer's, I know, has a ton of experience in this department, which I really appreciate. And thanks for being here. It's good to see you. When it comes to magic items, if you're looking to address this, there are a number of outsized magical weapons that can address the amount of damage that's being dealt if you're just looking to boost the ranger. It doesn't actually take a whole heck of a lot to fix that problem. If damage is lagging at a certain point and the ranger's starting to look kind of sad with their scimitar and short sword, and they're just not, delivering the kind of damage that they were, well, a flame tongue weapon will absolutely boost their damage by 2d6 for every attack with that weapon. If you really want to make sure it ends up in the dual wielding ranger's hands, make it a pair of magical weapons that are tied together, require one attunement slot, but they're a pair of frost tongues or something that does an extra d6 of each one's. You're right. Arch's Drist had the figure of wondrous power, although his was way cooler. Let's be honest here. But giving them an animal companion through a magic item is another way to boost them and give them extra options. But honestly, for their damage potential and the curve that is the problem, I just give them a magic item, a magic weapon that deals extra damage, and put them back on the curve. Like, if you wanted them to get that extra d6 all the time from the hunter's mark, like we suggested at level 13, you could literally just give them a frost tongue weapon and they'll get an extra d6 all the time. Sorry, a frost brand weapon, and they'd get the extra d6 all the time. Or if you want to push them up further than that, give them a flame tongue weapon and they'll get 2d6 extra damage all the time. Literally, those magic items can and will fix that curve for the ranger without any real issues. Like, you don't even need to homebrew at that point. You just need to be aware of when somebody is not being able to perform as well as the others at the table, and then target the magic items that you put into the game to be suitable to them. Give them something a little bit more powerful than you give to the guy who's super optimized in the exact perfect class. Great point and great suggestion. Let's see. Range of damage starts to lag at tier 3. Fixing at level 13 seems reasonable. The question is whether you're improving sustained damage or burst damage. Removing concentration assumes you are using limited spell slots. Interesting. That's Steven there. Thank you, buddy. I guess I see what that is. I figure the spell slots portion of concentration, you're going to be using more spell slots if you are able to use your free hunter's marks and also cast your other spells. Then not having concentration on those free hunter's marks, especially since they last for an easy hour, is going to mean that you can use more of your spell slots than you currently kind of can. Rangers stuck in a weird spot where a lot of the time some of their spell slots are just sitting there and they can't reasonably use them while also gearing up to do the kind of damage that they're looking. The use of bonus action, Steven's pointing out, is as much of a problem as concentration, and you're not wrong on especially at lower tiers, which is ironically where the ranger kicks out the most. But finding the opportunity to make sure you put uh, your your damage on the right target and keeping it focused on them, and it's going to last you a couple of rounds, could be an issue. That could be another place where you could adjust Hunter's Mark at a higher tier if you wanted to make it to where it doesn't use up that bonus action. I'm not sure. That would definitely help in terms of the organization of it. Like it would make it more consistent damage, but I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about it in the first sense. I would probably want to play around with it a little bit in order to like judge what it was going to make a big change on. But ultimately, it doesn't feel super unreasonable to switch it around. Maybe if you made it to where it cost them their reaction when the creature died, that would be something that I think would be pretty cool. If it was a reaction when the creature was defeated to switch it over to another one, then it still has some kind of like action economy, but it doesn't gimp you from being able to use your bonus action to get those extra attacks that you're going to be sort of relying on with a two weapon build at least. So that's a good idea. Kind of like that. Um, oh, we got lots of great comments here. The vicious weapons have an extra 2d6. Yeah, exactly. That's a straight up simple weapon that just adds straight up damage and builds it up. Thank you, RDWNDR. Reed Winder. I'm not sure what that one's. You got to tell me what that one stands for. Anyway, thank you. That's a great point. Quiver of Alona, I'm not a big fan of, Ashen, Aussie. It's got so much potential to be an awesome magical item, and it's never landed correctly because nobody needs to carry that many bows, spears, and javelins, and very rarely is it a big problem when you have that many that you got to carry them somehow. Red Wanderer, marvelous. Thanks, IDW. Anyway, that's just my thought, and I do agree with archers that being able to fly at low levels, especially, is one of my least favorite things as a dungeon master for what it does to exploration. It's not so bad in mid tiers and at high end, but early in the game just bothers me something fierce. That's why I don't allow races that can fly in my games. That's just me personally, though. All right, let me see. Back on to a couple of the ideas that I already had while we get a couple of extra comments in here for homebrew or for future development, because the range is not done. Like we have the base of the ranger again, but as we saw in the 2014 edition of D&D, like there's still the opportunity for things like another Tasha's book to come out with a bunch of additional options that could be swapped in and changed. So there's still a chance for additional development down the line. There's still a chance for Wizards to get this right? Or for Wizards to give us a toolkit that we can swap in that to us is going to feel like it's right. Because ultimately, Ranger is one of those classes that's really plagued by the fact that everybody's view of the quintessential Ranger is a little bit different. Some of us are seeing Aragorn, while others of us are seeing Drizzt. And the two of them bear some similarities, but really, like they're two different guys, right? And so it's tough for Wizards to provide the perfect Ranger class in a way that's probably not the same for almost any of the other classes, because the Ranger just doesn't fit a single archetype really the same as all the other classes do. So there is some struggle there, but they could still give us tools, right? So one of the ways that I think that they could give us cool tools that would help the Ranger shine would be if in future developments, subclasses that came out also leaned on Hunter's Mark. We already have this big, like, you kind of have to use Hunter's Mark in order to be an effective Ranger. If we're going to make that the case, then if we tied more of our subclass features onto that Hunter's Mark to where casting the Hunter's Mark had more influence as we went up in levels than just providing that damage, then I feel like we could make it less frustrating that we are stuck casting that. I almost thought in the UA for the Forgotten Realms stuff with the Winter Warrior that or Winter Walker, whatever they call that thing, that they were going that route to where your Hunter's Mark was going to become a tanking ability that forced the opponent to fight the Ranger and gave you temporary hit points when you were doing things with it. You cast it, you get temporary hit points, you put it on them, and you get a disadvantage. They just missed the mark by this much on that one. If they had have just made it to where Hunter's Mark gave the Ranger a role, then that would make the subclass choice more valuable and would make Hunter's Mark more versatile because it did something other than just provide that extra little bit of damage. And so I think that if we could tie more of these two subclasses in the future, then that would be one way that we could improve the Ranger, especially if those subclass features at, say, 11th level, when the Ranger should be getting a boost in damage output like every other class, gave them a damage output at level 11 consistently every time they created a Plummen subclass, because that's what they need to be doing. But for some reason, they're not. And that drives me a little bit nuts because every other class at level 11 is getting something that is boosting them. And the Ranger is just missing out right there, which is why level 13 removing concentration might be a decent option. All right, back to the chat. Let's see what people are saying. Can you talk about non-combat balance? I feel like Rangers never get the cool tracking fantasy in the same way other non-combat strengths get their fantasy. I agree with you, Charlie, but I don't think that that's actually a fault of the Ranger as a designed subclass. It's really more of a matter of the way that we run Dungeons and Dragons games and how difficult it is to make a tracking encounter in the current system interesting and fun, right? Like people don't look at tracking encounters the way that we should. Like we look at, say, the rogue fantasy of being able to slip in anywhere and unlock the lock, and into that we go with, oh well, there's going to be people watching, so they're going to have to sneak past it, and then there's going to be a trap on the lock that they have to first find, and then they have to puzzle it out, and then they have to disarm it, and then they get to check and unlock the door, and then they get to slip in the room and do the thing that they are there for. And so we've got all these cool steps for the rogue to follow through. Whereas for the Ranger, we think, oh, we're going to track the prey, so we're going to roll a survival check. Crickets. Like that's it, right? But what if when we were organizing a tracking situation, we said, well, what kind of complications are going to come up on tracking somebody? Well, what if they're going to cross some water? What if they go under the path of another animal, a beast that needs to be avoided, or else maybe you're going to muss up the trail by having combat over the top of these tracks? So you've got to use your animal handling in order to calm the beast and slip your way through. You got to use your nature skill in order to recognize why the creature turned at this point, or how the layout of the stream is going to affect the information you did. Give them something to play through, and the Ranger will have a great time. If you just say survival check to track the guy, then yes, it's going to be boring, and it's going to be boring every time. Just like it's not interesting to unlock a door that has nothing special about it except for the fact that it's locked, right? You get the same sense of satisfaction. Aha, I opened the door, as you do of, aha, I managed to roll the survival check. And maybe the only difference that might make it more exciting for people to unlock the door versus the survival check is because we're curious about what's on the other side of the door. So if we want to get the same feeling for Rangers, we just need to make curiosity about what's at the end of the trail. That would be my opinion on that one. All right, let's see what else we got here. Be a shame if it was windy out, says White Hands on Pants. Great name. Yes, exactly right. Wind could be something that makes things interesting, and especially if we're talking about the flying thing. That's just great. Let's see. Price doesn't take crazy idea of a reorg. Rangers take any subclass feature from Druid or Fighter or Rogue. Ooh, gee, that would be interesting to sort of combine into that fantasy. That could get out of hand really fast, but it would be fun. Cool tracking was AD and D was not all that fun. Grouch, I started playing in 2nd edition AD and D, but my Ranger very swiftly switched over to Paladin, which was awful, by the way, because dual classing. Ugh. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. But I don't know for sure what it is you're referring to there, so I'd love to hear more about that. Rangers get more skill proficiencies and expertise than other classes, but during play, it's not too exciting. And I think that the reason that it's not too exciting is we don't make it exciting enough as the DM. And the other, like the rogue's abilities, just sort of fit into most published modules and most normal adventure things. And the ranger, we just, like I said, we just skip ahead to jump to the next thing. Um, let's see. All right. I'm going to jump to my last thought that I already had before we round things out in the chat. Uh, for homebrew or future development, something that we could either make ourselves or something that we can look forward to for the ranger, I hope, are more ranger-only spells. Especially if we're removing concentration from the from Hunter's Mark, or if we're doing this, like if Wizards is doing this, if Wizards of the Coast doesn't want to back down on having concentration for Hunter's Mark, which, let's be honest, they're probably not going to back down. If they don't want to back down on keeping concentration on Hunter's Mark, then they could introduce more ranger only spells that don't use concentration but are still really, really cool for the ranger. They already took steps in this direction when they rebalanced the spells for the 2024 Players Handbook. They went ahead and removed concentration from a number of spells that had it previously, in order to allow the ranger to use those at the same time as their Hunter's Mark. And that was a big improvement. Like if they introduce more spells like that, for instance, if we get a new Zephyr Strike that allows you to just instantaneously do the little extra bit of damage and get the free disengage and movement, and it's a bonus action after you've hit the guy, a la the style of the Divine Smite, then more ranger smite spells is going to allow the ranger to shine a little bit more, and the more spell slots they have, the more often they can use it. So at higher levels, the better they get, especially if they upcast and get more strength as you go. Secondary effects on those could be more telling. Things like that are options that Wizards of the Coast could lean into in order to fix the ranger without having to actually change anything in it. And likewise, those are things that we could develop if we are concerned about our ranger's damage. Then why not let them research a custom spell that can boost things a little bit up? If that's the kind of thing that you're comfortable with at your table, the kind of thing that your players and you are interested in, I would say that's a great way to fix the ranger with the design philosophy of less is more. Changing things from the basic rules is not as good to me as adding a little something in that's going to rebalance and tweak, or making minor small changes where we can. All right, let's see. Charlie commented there, if holding a ranged weapon, if a flying enemy enters your range, you can use your reaction to make a ranged attack on that creature. That would be pretty stinking cool. Definitely a fun feature that would be good for it. I think a great way to introduce that would be, right back to my last point, make it a spell. If that was a spell that was added as a reaction spell for rangers only, I can see a lot of ranger archers getting a lot of use out of that, but it also balances it by tying it to their spell slots. Grouch, thank you for answering my question and throwing that in there. Ranger tracking in 1E gave different things they could identify by level. And yes, dual class, change of class was pretty brutal. Yeah, it was rough. 100% agree on that one. Ranger tracking, yeah, that right there at least gives you, like usually I do that kind of thing with a survival check or a nature check, depending upon the trails and stuff like that. So it is something that you can still have in there, but we don't have a lot of specific guidance on necessarily using it. We did get some recent changes to the methods for doing travel in the DMG, which I thought were pretty good for like how you can forage or when you can track something and how difficult those kinds of things are. And if we lean into that, I do feel like that elevates the ranger a little bit. And I do think that it's probably a better way to use a skill check. Just I agree with you on that one, Grouch. But it would be good if we had more tables and charts that gave ideas for DMs on what these numbers can look like. One of the downfalls of the 2024 rules that I've been seeing, and most of it I really like, is that a lot of information has been taken out that is sort of common consciousness for a lot of older DMs, but is not there as guidance for the new guy. And so having tables and charts that said, it might be this kind of a DC to discover this kind of creature, or stuff like that, could have been a really great opportunity to introduce with the rules changes, and it just didn't happen. Instead, some things got taken out. My big complaint recently was about mimics. Mimics and animated objects and awakened plants no longer have a trait that makes them look like they're not a creature. They used to have a specific trait that explains how you went about figuring out that they weren't just a regular tree, right? But now that trait's gone, and you still have to use it, even though the trait doesn't exist anymore, because it doesn't make a lot of sense that you're like, aha, that tree is an awakened tree. Every tree, that tree is an awakened tree. Every mimic you now know is a mimic instead of a chest, but they're still in adventures as if they were hidden and just, not a chest, not a mimic. And there's no rules to bridge that gap anymore. And that's a real shame, because those rules are obviously still going to need to be used, but now we have to include them in every single mention of a mimic or animated object in our adventures, how you're going to determine whether or not they're a real creature or a real object. And there's no guidance for the new DM on how to do that, which I think is a real big shame. All right. I'm going to wrap up with a handful of comments from the chat, and then just a bunch of thanks to you all for being here. I really appreciate you all. Charlie, if within 5 to 10 feet, give them a cunning strike-esque system for ranged weapons, like pin a foot, shoot through an enemy into one behind, stab with an arrow before shooting, etc. I do agree that a cunning strike style system would be really awesome to make the ranger a little more fun. I think it'd be a great subclass system if they had gone that route, to make the archer ranger and the dual wielder ranger as subtypes with cunning strike-esque options at like mid-level, not their third level gain of a subclass feature, but when they hit, what is it, 7th for that? Yeah, 7th for the ranger. If they hit 7th level and they get that feature, that would have been a cool way to give them some extra options. That would be pretty nasty. Let's see, Unsia. Hey, welcome, buddy. It's great to see you. Was changing Hunter's Mark to be a class feature instead of a spell mentioned? So I didn't necessarily talk about making it a class feature, though that's an interesting idea. I just suggested removing concentration on it at 13th level as a simple way to try and tie things together. And at that point, even though it's a spell, because it doesn't cost a spell slot most of the time, and it's a bonus action, you could still cast it with another spell, and that would sort of take care of a few of those things. So I'm going to have to wrap it up here so that I can go and spend some time with my wife before I have to work tonight. But I appreciate you all, and thank you for coming today. In major summary here, I don't think that the Ranger is completely broken, and I don't think that it is beyond saving. I think that at low levels, the Ranger absolutely bloody shines and looks awesome and does a great job. At higher levels, they do fall behind, and they could use some love and some help. But as we talked about today, like, you could do that with a simple, tiny little changes to try and tweak it up there, or as the DM, please just go ahead and feel free to throw some magic items that are ranger specific and are going to help your ranger to shine when they get to those mid and high tiers. And they will be able to keep up with everyone else if they have the equipment that it requires to do so. It doesn't have to be a this needs to be fixed or else we can't play it for your players. Make sure that they know that they can count on you to help them, because ultimately we want them to be kicking as much butt as everybody else so that everybody at the table, we can be having fun. We don't need them to be kicking more butt than everybody else. We just need to help everybody have fun at the table. And sometimes the way that we have fun at the table is by leaning in to the thing that we're excited about. And I think that's great. Thank you all for being here. Sorry, it was a couple of weeks since the last D&D musing, but I was gone, as I mentioned, in Australia, and I'm grateful that you're here when I get back. I'm going to be putting a post out there shortly for the tank class supporters to decide what we're going to muse about next. So if you're a tank class supporter, please keep your eyes open for that. And if you're not a tank class supporter, but you would like to have a say in what we muse about, then you probably need to become a tank class supporter. That's how that works. Thanks, guys, for joining us. And otherwise, I'll see you next time. Happy adventuring. Okay, now the awkward part where I find the end stream button. Here we go. Bye now.